Fields. I've been with the department since 2014. Currently a captain. And myself and Dean will kind of be giving the presentation here tonight. Introduce yourself real quick.
I'm Dean Lang. I'm one of the volunteers here. I've been here 4 years, and before that I spent 27 years at a paid fire department.
So again, thank you for attending. Tonight is intended to provide clear factual information about the proposed levy. We'll give you some background on our current operations, our on-call staffing, and again, the adjustment to the levy. We'd ask you to hold all your questions to the end. We'll have some people in the back. You can go and ask them whatever you want. Dean, Chief, and one of the commissioners will be talking about kind of operations. And then Mike and I will be going over taxes, the impact that it will have on you and your home, and any other questions that you may have. Okay? So again, we're going to overview our operations, kind of give you guys a little bit more insight of what we're doing, why we're doing it, explain on-call staffing, what it means, why we use it, how we utilize it, and
Is that part of this, Austin?
yeah, no, and then we'll outline how we're planning on using that extra levy increase. So I will pass over to Dean.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. I know everybody's busy, but this is an important issue, so I'm glad you made time out of your schedules. So an overview of our services that Garden Valley Fire does. Obviously, it's a fire department, so it does fire suppression. We do, naturally, we do all the structure fire stuff. And then we also do wildland, which in this country, that is a huge, huge footprint. We got a good taste of that a couple of years ago with all the fires that were local. We do emergency medical services. This is a huge difference between the fire department these days and the fire department of yesteryear. And like every fire department, EMS is 75, 80-ish% of the volume that we do, right? So with that comes a lot of different certifications and so forth. And our goal is for everybody to be an EMT. Eventually we'll get there. Motor vehicle accidents, again, for those kinds of response, we got to send an engine for kind of extrication, those kinds of things. And EMS, we got to have a place for these folks to go to get them transported and all that kind of thing. This is the big district, right? We go on 17 East, we go all the way over to Pine Flats. That's the boundary-ish. But when Loman needs us, we'll go further, right? We've gone up on the pass for avalanches. This is a huge district. We do from 11 miles worth on Highway 55, which takes a huge chunk out of our time and our resources. And so while we're going through this, I want you to think about what happens when we get a car wreck at milepost 83 on Highway 55, and we send an engine and an ambulance to that call. Who's taking care of the taxpayers of Garden Valley, right? In addition to that, we do swiftwater rescue and rope rescue. This department does a ton of stuff. I saw one statistic, I don't know if it's accurate for sure or not, but there's only about 6 volunteer fire departments in the state of Idaho that does all these disciplines. And if you look at rope rescue and swiftwater especially, those are very, very dangerous situations because they're low frequency and high risk. And anytime you have that in the matrix, there's a chance for catastrophe, right? Think about 3 in the morning, putting people over the side on ropes, going into the river. It's this high risk, low frequency stuff that kills firefighters all the time. So the on-call staffing model, that's what we're using right now. There's a couple of key things that does. For the volunteers themselves, it allows them to schedule shifts. That's opposed to carrying a pager and wondering when or if you're going to have to go somewhere, right? So now when you sign up for a shift, you're committed to that 12-hour shift. Committed, just like it's your job. And so you don't go to Boise. You probably don't do a transmission change, right? Because we have to be clean and presentable, because any second we could go on an EMS call and transport it to the hospital, right? It's different than the old days where we only did fire and nobody cared what you're wearing because you're in bunker gear, right? Now we have to be presentable because we may be transporting to the hospital. It also defines minimum staffing. So in minimum staffing, what that means is how many folks are on duty on any given day. And it breaks down even further than that, because not all of our people are swift water. Not all of our people are rope rescue. Not all of our people are EMTs, right? We're working on all those things, but some of us are getting a little bit long in the tooth to be hanging off a rope into the river in the middle of the night, right? Like me. So nobody's an EMT. We can't have a staffer, nobody knows how to run the pump on that fire truck, right? So when we do these on-call and the minimum staffing, it's part of that deal is to make sure we have somebody for all those little slots, so that when we roll out the door, we're going to be efficient and have all the tools that we need. And then lastly, the on-call staffing model allows us to have a duty officer. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's the supervisor for the shift. That person, you probably see Chief in his command car or Austin in the blue command car. That's the duty officer vehicle. And his job is to get out in front of everything else, work with dispatch, make sure that we have the right stuff and the right people going to the right call, and adjust all that stuff. The single most important thing we can do for our folks is to have a competent supervisor in place when these calls happen. I think that's pretty much a universal standard. And this allows us to do that. We have 4 folks that do that. It's the company officers and the chief. We all rotate and take turns doing that duty officer position. And when we do that, we're the ones that have those duty vehicles. Before we had on-call, the volunteer availability varied by time of day, nationally being volunteers. If it's a call at 3 p.m., where's most of our folks? At work, right? Some of us are retired, a lot of us aren't. The other thing about this area here is we're an older demographic, right? We're not a community full of a bunch of 22-year-old studs running around. Some of us are getting a little bit older, and so our capabilities are a little less, our availability may be less or more depending on what's going on, and so forth. Before we had on-call, people would just show up and we would assemble those teams when we got a dispatch, when we got to the station, right? Our average response time back in those days was 28 minutes. That's from the time of dispatch till the time help got to somebody that needed it, right? Always remember that when those tones go off, just like they just did, somebody's having a really bad day, right? Maybe the worst day of their lives. So that response time becomes critical. And you'll see how that plays out, because with our lack of folks in our topography, meaning the way we live in an unbelievably beautiful place, but that makes dispatch, radio communications, responding challenging, to say the least. EMT availability was not always predictable. Sometimes we would get there, there would be an EMS call, nobody's an EMT. In those cases, we have to call for mutual aid. Mutual aid for us is another fire department, i.e. Horseshoe Bend, Lowman, or worst case scenario, getting an ambulance out of Boise with acute care, right? When you think about having that bad day and you call 911, do you really want to wait another hour and a half for somebody to come out of Boise? It's just not acceptable. Okay, a little compare and contrast. We talked a lot about these things as far as the on-call beforehand. We didn't really know who was coming. We didn't know who had what skills because it was absolutely ad hoc, right? Can you imagine running your own company and you never know every day who's coming or what skills they have? Nobody could run a business like that, right? But yet, we're trying to do this at a volunteer level for emergency services, and it's just not acceptable. By the way, all these troubles that we're talking about, these challenges, this is a nationwide thing. They've been talking about this for 20 years. You know, people can't get volunteers. It's just, you know, people don't have time. People are trying to raise families, all those kinds of things, and a lot of people just don't want to do it. Now that we have on-call, we've reduced that response time to 14 minutes. That's cutting that thing in half, right? That is huge. And we'll talk about some of those timelines here in a little bit. When we schedule our staffing, we make sure there's an EMT. We make sure there's an engineer, the person that runs that pump. We make sure there's a company officer, those kinds of things. What do we do if we have to go to the site? Do we have a road person? Do we have a competent road person, right? All this stuff, if you don't use it, you will lose it, right? Just like the rule of life. You got to use this stuff or you become not so good at it. You have a dedicated staff that's prepared to respond. I was asked at the last meeting how that was part of the deal. When you are signed up for duty, right, your mindset is completely different than when you're not on duty, right? You don't do a transmission job. You stay clean. You don't get to go to Boise. You are on the job. So when that bell rings, you're expected to go and perform, right? You don't get to have a beer. You don't get to have to do any of that kind of stuff. You are on duty, right? So that's why that response time is in half, right? The guys on duty, when they go to bed, they have their shoes by their bed. Just like you see in the old firehouse movies, you got to be able to jump in your stuff and be gone. We talked about dedicated skills that are met. The duty officer plays a crucial role. I mentioned that it's probably the single most thing we could do for the safety of our folks. That duty officer does a ton of stuff. When that dispatch comes, that duty officer has to get back with dispatch and say, hey, we acknowledge, and we're going to be responding. And then they start to setting the tone, right? Some of our calls, cardiac, stroke, severe respiratory stuff, will get what we call an automatic air med. But guess what happens in the wintertime? Sometimes they're not available, right? We've got the 2 ships in Boise, 1 in Ontario. One of the first things I always do if I'm the duty officer is I check on the availability to see if that's a card I can play here. So that when we're on a call, we know, hey, this is an option or it's not. Because if it's not, and it's a severe cardiac thing, that makes me shift gears. Now I want a paramedic, but we don't have any paramedics in Garden Valley. So I have to set up some kind of a rendezvous on Highway 55 to reduce that time between our basic life support and advanced life support that a paramedic can provide, right? So that duty officer does a ton of stuff. It says IAP, that's Incident Action Plan. We have it in place. So again, I'll just use myself. If I'm on duty, I'll say, Austin, you're our EMT. Mike, you're our engineer. Susie and Joe, you're the 2 firefighters, right? So that they know if we get an EMS call, he's thinking EMS all day long, right? He's going to be the person in the back of the ambulance when we get an EMS call. It changes how you think and allows you to respond at a much higher level. And of course, anytime we have extra folks, they're always welcome to come down, but we never count on the folks that are maybes, right? I always teach, hope is not a plan. And when you're relying on folks to show up, just that aren't on duty, that's your plan, hope, right? Bad plan. Okay, emergency medical response and time. I mentioned cardiac, stroke, and some of the respiratory stuff. The time from intervention to the time we can get folks to the hospital is critical. I don't think anybody can argue with that. Here's the challenge. We live remote. How long does it take us to get to a hospital in Boise? Every bit of an hour and a half, when the roads are dry and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you a 30-second story that nobody knows I'm going to tell because it happened to me this week. A very good friend of mine from my fire department back in Washington State is snowmobiling in the Ochoco Mountains. You guys know where that's at, Central Oregon. Crashes. He's with another paramedic. Talks Lifeline into flying out there because Joe Citizen doesn't get to activate paramedic. That's a fire department thing, sheriff thing, those kinds of things. But this guy was a paid paramedic, talked him into it. Anyway, they get him flown to Bend and he dies a couple hours later, right? So, had that happened in town, right, the department I came from, we have 4 hospitals within 15 minutes. Probably might have made it. But because he's remote, he don't, right? In trauma, we have a thing called the golden hour. And that golden hour is from the time of incident to the time that patient gets to definitive care, being surgery at the hospital. That's that time frame, right? Now, I want you to think about somebody that wrecks their car on Highway 55 at 2 in the morning. How long before you think we get there? How long is it before somebody discovers there's a wreck there? Right? And we drive out there, 20 minutes by the time we get there or whatever. Where are we at on that golden hour? We already can't make it. Right? It's not, you don't have to be one of those mathematicians to figure out this don't work. Right? So, we live in an unbelievably beautiful place. But there's a price for that. We don't have paramedics on every engine running around all over the place. We have what we have. Some considerations and challenges. We consider EMS services critical, an essential service. The state of Idaho doesn't necessarily think that, right? If our ambulance goes away, and I'm not saying it is, it goes away. Right? It's not considered an essential service. But realize this, when you're having chest pains, Garden Valley Ambulance gets there, that might be the only intervention some of these folks get. You would be amazed how many people will not be transported because of financial issues or insurance issues or what. It's sad. It's horrible. Right? So we may be the only game in town. Obviously, higher mortality rates because, remember the golden hour? Hey, nobody knows living remote like we do, right? We know that that's going to be a deal. And then we talked a little bit about the geographic and infrastructure challenges. Man, we live in big mountains, big rivers, big everything, and we have horrible radio communications. We're still on a VHF system, which is the only system that would work here. You could get fancy and spend a bunch of money, it's not going to work. We have to have line of sight stuff, so we have repeaters on the different mountains. But it's rough sledding at best, let's put it that way. So that's a challenge that we're always fighting. Some of the challenge that we deal with, financial instability. We don't know how many calls we're going to get. Did you know when we go out to Ruben's house and he said, hey, I'm okay, I don't need to be transported, nobody pays for any of that. That's a cost for the fire department. Or anytime we go anywhere and don't transport, even if we do transport, we lose money all the time because Medicare pays so much, Medicaid pays so much, insurance don't pay at all sometimes. The ambulance business is a rough go. It is a really rough go. That's why the ambulance service that was here before isn't anymore. Most private ambulances go out of business. When I started in Clark County back in '91, we had 4 ambulance services servicing around Vancouver and Portland and all that. And by the time I left, there was only 1 surviving, and they were barely hanging on. It's a rough business. Workforce shortages. We're a volunteer organization. We're an elderly community, right? I don't know what the average age of Garden Valley is, but it's got to be in the 50s of folks here. We have a pretty old workforce with the fire department as well, although we did get an infusion with really a great program that Chief came up with, getting some of these EMS students out of Boise, and they come up and spend 12 or 24-hour shift up here. And frankly, what we're paying everybody for the stipend now, it's costing them money, right? So those folks, maybe not be around as long as we want them to go to come, but they're a valuable asset for us right now. In fact, we've got some in the crowd here tonight. So I would welcome you guys talking to some of those folks when this is over. Obviously, we got longer response times, and we go, like I said, we go up past Lome and we go all over the place to help you, because you have a legal responsibility, but you also have a moral one, right? And so sometimes those don't line up all that great, and you've got to make a call. And I talked about the aging population. This is just a blurb on what it's a standard called NFPA 1720. What it does is it says, hey, for a fire department, this is how many folks you need to respond to any kind of given call. So keep in mind that NFPA 1720, it's not a law, but it is the standard. And so if you end up in court somehow, they are going to measure you to the standard, not the law, the established practice. Also, NFPA 1720 doesn't count EMS. It's for fire staffing. Here's what it says. For our area, we should have 6. And again, remember, that's not including EMS, right? And that's our goal. We want to have 6 folks on duty every day, 365. Okay, so why 6? So let's say it's a motor vehicle accident. Obviously, we got to have 2 people on an ambulance, right? Somebody's got to drive, somebody's got to attend. There's 2. We have a duty officer, there's 3. Right now, we only run with 4. So again, do some math, and there's not enough people to even drive the engine, right? Because every time we get a car wreck, we send engine 804 and we send medic 1, right? Engine goes there, takes care of the scene, stabilizes the vehicle, starts doing all that. The jaws of life, you've seen those on TV and stuff. All those come off of engine 804, and the folks on medic 1 are attending to the patient, right? So that's why on a motor vehicle accident, structure fire, having 4 people on that we have now is heck, there's a standard called 2 in and 2 out, meaning if you have 2 people inside a burning building, you got to have 2 people out in case those people need to be rescued. So there's your 4. It doesn't include a duty officer, nobody to run the pump, none of that kind of stuff. So on a structure fire, if it's a working fire and I'm the duty officer, the very first thing I do is do an all call for everybody in Garden Valley to come running if they can. And I also ask for another engine and another water cannon. And those are going to come from Lowman or Horseshoe Bend. So you're looking at, what, 45 minutes best by the time they get there? Right? So again, that's part of the price that we pay for living rural. But having 4 people on like we do now versus the 6 that we're trying to get to is a really big deal. And again, medical, it only takes 2 for the ambulance, right? As soon as those folks are transporting and Mrs. Smith has there's another call for somebody that's having, whether it's a chest pain, or we go on an unbelievable amount of ATV rollovers, you would be amazed how many people wreck their 4-wheelers. Who goes to that? When we only have 4 people, might not have anybody come. So that's part of why we're trying to get that staffing up to 6, because it gives you so many more options than 4. Even though it's only 2 more, it just gives you a 10 more options.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of take the financial side, talk to you guys about, first of all, what have we done to cut expenses? What have we done to prevent us coming to you guys as taxpayers to ask for a higher levy? So the first thing is CODA. We use CODA as a scheduling app. This is what actually handles the people logging in to take and assign themselves to shifts. We have a lot of tools that we utilize in that. We looked into programs to just kind of purchase a subscription. Those are anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000 a year, just for that scheduling app. We were able to have one of our lieutenants build that out. We have about a $75 a year maintenance fee on that, just to pay for some text messaging and stuff out of there. So that's about $75 instead of $12,000 to $25,000. We also do our own in-house training. So we have a CPR instructor, myself as an EMT, state of Idaho EMS instructor, and then we also have Dean and Chief set up with Idaho Fire Service training, so they can both do really any class that they offer. So firefighter essentials, they can do a hazmat class, lots of different options that they offer, and those two are able to teach it for us, which obviously saves us a lot of money rather than bringing in instructors from Boise or Cascade, something like that. Okay. And then obviously the volunteer staffing model. We currently have 2 paid employees. Chief and myself are there at the station 8 to 5. On weekdays, we handle mostly administration stuff and run calls. So we rely a lot on the volunteers, and that saves us a lot of money over full-time or part-time staff. Regional training partnerships, so obviously we utilize our mutual aid partners as much as possible, which helps us reduce some of the need of extra equipment. Dean said if we have a structure fire, we're probably automatically calling for an engine and a tender from those surrounding areas, and working together saves our community some money. I mentioned the state fire service training, so that's state run. All of those resources are free to us, especially with the in-house instructors. So we utilize that as much as possible. Grant funding. So as you know, very few grants actually will pay for personnel or any sort of staffing like that. They're pretty cut and dry as far as how we can utilize them. But we were able to get the fiscal year 25 EM Save grant through the state of Idaho. That purchased a new duty officer vehicle that Dean was talking about. We have a duty officer that runs command. So that set us up with a whole new vehicle, basically for free, cost free to the taxpayers out of our budget. And then right-sized emergency response. So really what that means is if you ever see when you're in Boise, those guys are running an engine and an ambulance to every call. I don't know how familiar you guys are with engines. Those are not cheap. So racking up miles on a $750,000 to $1 million potential engine is very expensive. Not to mention tires, maintenance, all that stuff on those vehicles. So we only send out an ambulance and the duty officer vehicle to those basic medicals. And because that DO is getting out soon, they can stand down any other resources that we have. So if we get toned out to a structure fire, Dean makes it there and says, no, this really isn't a structure fire. There's a big bonfire out back. He right away can stand down those resources, get rigs back in service, and reduce wear and tear on any of our Okay, and then understanding levy rates. So the county assesses your home values, as most of you know, at per 100,000. So you'll see some numbers that we set based off of those numbers. We do want to clarify, we don't set those assessed values. The county has an assessor that comes out and does that. So we don't have any influence on whether your home is assessed at 500,000 or $1 million. And then our levy growth per year, so what we're able to raise our budget every year without going to you guys as taxpayers is 3%. As you guys know, every year cost of living goes up way more than 3%. We're hit by the same numbers. Engines have gone up 2 or 3 times over the last, since COVID, and that's across the board. So that's something that we face. And then growth in population or homes in the district doesn't directly impact our budget. So if we had a huge influx of $1 million homes being built right down the street, that doesn't mean any more money for us. It's the same amount of money. What it means is each taxpayer pays a little bit less because it's spread over more properties. Okay, this kind of explains that. It's probably hard for you guys to see in the back, but this is kind of a little example of that. So this road here on the left, it costs $100 to snowplow that road, remove all the snow off of it. With only 2 homes, those 2 homes equally divide that cost into $50 per home. Okay, so now we have a little bit more growth. We now have 5 homes, but you see this home over here has $2 cents. So that's a little bit more expensive. They're going to pay a little bit higher share. But still, the cost of the road, cost of plowing the road is still $100. It's just divided out into each home. So in that example, each dollar sign, so your 4 dollar sign, single dollar sign houses would each pay $16.67 out of that $100. The $2 sign house would pay about $33. And then you expand that clear down to $8.34 per dollar sign on the diagram over there. So same thing is true with us. Our budget is set. If a bunch of new homes are built, the demand for our services go up, but our budget doesn't. Okay, and then just some comparison between the other Boise County Fire and EMS departments. So these are all mill rates. We're down here at the bottom. So our mill rate currently is $29.43 per 100,000 of assessed value. We're proposing another $15 to that. If you look at some of these other numbers, Idaho City Fire is currently at $54.15 per 100,000. So right now they're almost double what we are. Wilderness Range is $91.95, so they're almost 3 times. They are 3 times what our current levy is. So just some other options for you guys. And again, those guys are only providing fire service. So all of the Highway 21 corridor, Lowman, Idaho City, Wilderness Ranch are also paying, so they're both paying that higher fire tax and an EMS tax on top of that, which EBCED is the one providing that. And EBCED's current value or budget is $39.67 per 100,000. So we're significantly below all of those others, even before you combine EMS and fire. Okay, what will this cost me? So we're looking to increase our budget by $186,150. And what that does for us is allows those 6 on-call positions to get a stipend. That estimated impact is, again, about another $15 per 100,000. So for your average home, here is $550,000. So the average home would pay about an extra $85 per year or $7 a month. We all know how far $7 a month gets us now. We pay that much for coffee delivery, right? So we have this little link here at the bottom. That will take you to our website. You can enter your home's assessed value into that, and it will spit out exact numbers on what, or estimated numbers on what this will cost you, as well as show you what your assessed value would be in any of these other districts. Okay, so some of our operational considerations if the levy doesn't pass. We will continue to reevaluate, but we're in a position now where we can't sustain the on-call system anymore, any stipends for those guys. So we'll likely have to reduce coverage and staffing. We'll be relying on mutual aid, so Horseshoe Bend, Lowman, maybe a acute ambulance coming from Boise. Most of the time is utilizing acute for their service. Their ambulance is only in service about 25% of the time. So they're most of the, about 3/4 of the time they're utilizing acute, driving from Boise to provide EMS service. So mutual aid for us can be tough there and maybe extended. Reduction in services, potentially including EMS. We don't want to drop EMS, and it'll really be one of the last things. We'll probably have to start with rope rescue, swiftwater rescue, and potentially EMS transport. What that means for us is if a vehicle goes in the river, or there's a boating accident, or maybe somebody's hiking and breaks a leg, we have to wait for, again, specialized mutual aid services, probably be Idaho Mountain Search and Rescue. They're also a volunteer organization out of Boise. So hour-and-a-half drive here, maybe 30 minutes to assemble their crew. So we're looking at 2 hours before they even enter our district. So those are pretty significant adjustments and reductions in service. Okay, again, we want to provide sustainable emergency services, but we have to align that with our budgetary constraints and also with the community needs. Okay, so we'll have, you want to go back there right now?
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to have some folks in the back. They will be available to answer your questions. Again, Mike McPherson and I will be back there talking about the taxes. If you have any questions about how they work or the impact on your home, we'll be able to answer that. And then Dean and Chief and one of our commissioners will be back there to talk about any of operations. So if you have questions about how we do things, why we operate a certain way, the way our budget works, any of that stuff, those guys can help you. And then please take a picture, come up and take a picture of this. It has all of our contact information, so our email, office hours, our phone number, our Facebook page, the website, and then also that tax calculator. So if you want to, we've got some flyers to pass out as well that has all that information, so you can contact us. And we do have some more of these, so we got a decent turnout tonight, but we would invite you guys to invite a neighbor or a friend next time. We'll be doing another one of these meetings at March 13th, the Senior Center at 5:30. So please invite those guys. Any of those guys in the back can help you with your question, okay?
I got a question.
Those guys in the back can, help you.
But this is
Okay.
more important, is that there should be an open forum, question and answer, so that we all hear the
So,
question and answer.
hang on. Any questions that you ask those guys will be put on a frequently asked questions page. They'll be able for you guys
We're
to
here
answer.
right now. We're not here right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We have
Right now,
a bunch of people ready to answer your questions. If we pass around a microphone right now, we'd be here all night. So we're going to spread out into a group where you guys can each come and ask us questions. We'll spread that out, post those questions afterwards. So again, we'd like to thank you guys for coming. Please come and grab a flyer, ask your questions, reach out to us, whatever you need.